Hello, good evening. My name is Jocelyn Wong. I am the Director of Community Engagement here at the Nantucket Historical Association. Thank you for joining us for this sure-to-be engaging talk tonight. I am beyond delighted to introduce our two speakers for tonight, Christopher Hoskins and Elizabeth Kahane. Christopher Hoskins is a co-author of the book Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. A graduate of Hofstra University, Christopher has worked for nearly 20 years as a photographer. Christopher lives in Orange County, New York, with his wife and 5 children, and traveled up from New York yesterday to join us. Elizabeth Kahane is a New York native who relishes documenting her surroundings and the joys of life through her camera. Over the years, she has produced a diverse body of work ranging from portraits, landscapes, still lifes, and large public installations. She has photographed events such as the Mille Miglia car race in Italy and the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. This fall, in fact, this month, Elizabeth published the stunning book, Come Join the Parade, over there at the table, featuring her poignant photographs of the Macy's parade as seen from her 3rd floor apartment window in New York. First, we will hear from Chris, who will present an overview of the history of the parade based on his research. Then we'll hear from Elizabeth, who will share about the present day parade as experienced from her window. So in 1924, 100 years ago, Macy's, the department store, wanted to celebrate the holidays, and many of their employees were immigrants or first-generation Americans, so they thought, let's develop something that celebrates all of those cultural traditions, and they thought of doing a parade. So the first iteration of the parade was some floats going down the street and animals actually on loan from the Bronx Zoo in cages. And then in a few years, it evolved to the beloved enormous helium balloons that we know today. So this year marks the 100th anniversary of the very first Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So it's very apt that we have our Sarg exhibition and these two speakers joining us this evening. So without further ado, I will welcome Chris Hoskins to the podium. Let's hear for Chris.
Well, first of all, thank everyone for coming. It's always a pleasure to see and meet Macy's Parade fans who just come together this time of year and express their joy and gratitude. We've all seen the Macy's Parade. Any show of hands, who has been to the parade? Look at that, fabulous. I'm in good company. So my story, again, my name is, you can call me Chris. I was born and raised on Long Island, and I was a working photographer. I was a yearbook photographer. Step here, look this way, look at the camera. Thank you very much. That was my career. Thank you very much. And what happened was during the course of my life, I had met another man called Robert M Grippo, who was also a film buff. And that was my first life. I was a movie fanatic. And he found out I worked in the parade. Actually, I worked for Macy's in the 80s, and I was actually in the parade for 3 times. And he was such a parade buff. He had VHS copies from parades from the 1970s. So he said, "Hey, why don't we do a book?" And I thought at the time that's a great idea because at the time there was no history of the Macy's parade. I mean, you saw a couple of articles in the newspapers. You saw maybe a couple of hits in the New York Times, but there was no hardcover book or a softcover book. So we decided our journey. We went, and off we went. Now, the first thing I want to have you show here, and again, as you see behind me, it's going to be cast as Tony Sarg and the history of the Macy's Parade. And since we're home at the Sarg Museum, it's a perfect place to be because he was the first creative genius of the parade and molded it into what we see today. So let's go through this right now. When Bob and I went to the New York Library, this is the first thing we saw. And as you can see, New York City, 1924. And this is the first poster for the first Macy's thing. Now look in the big, you notice the difference. It says Big Christmas Parade. Now, of course, they hadn't folded the Thanksgiving angle yet, but it was a brilliant concept. It's right out of the old, circus comes to town, it comes through, and it leads you to the big circus tents. It was the same concept. We'll have this parade, and we'll go right down to Macy's, and all the captive people will look at our windows. It's brilliant. One cynical writer called it a gimmick, but man, what a wonderful gimmick it was. And again, I want us to look at this. It was written in a very corny, old type of, a P.T. Barnum style. Look at this one thing. It says, a tremendous pageant of tableau, comedians, tragedians, elephants, bears, camels, monkeys, clowns, brass bands, and everything that makes a real circus parade so dear to everybody. And that was the spirit. But we noticed there was one thing. There was one person in this poster that was given credit that day, and that was Tony Sarg. He was the master of the windows, and it was, well, my glasses are not here, but you can see that it was called the Merry Frolics. That's right, we'll go through that. And again, it's a traditional parade, like she just said. It was animals, it was you see a man on stilts, clowns, bands, the same concept. And what we do know is it was a hit. Here is a brief clip we have here. And again, it's supposed to be the 1924 parade, but you see the floats, you see people working. And again, I'm going to touch on this later on, but it was a joy to see this thing in 1924. Who wouldn't want to go back in a time machine to see New York at that time and to see people just respond to the merriment? Thanksgiving in New York was very quiet at this time, I would imagine. But this created an event that stood the test of time. Here, 20,000 people attended. There was no television back then, so people went in person. Look at the crowds, the throngs of humanity. They love this thing. And so the parade is now at 96th Street. So this is what happened. The parade was an immediate hit. So what Macy's and New York did, they had a proclamations. And this is very prophetic, and they decided that going forward, there was going to be a Thanksgiving parade or a Christmas parade every year going forward. And it's genius if you think about it. It means there was going to be no Gimbals parade on the east side or no Bamberger's parade downtown. No, Macy's would own New York going forward. And we're going to go to my first thing, because Tony Sarg was in the beginning, he was just in charge of tasking of the windows. Now, those who've been to New York in the glory days of department stores, the windows was the show. People would go in New York, especially at this time, and walk and see the animatronics and the puppets. And that's what the whole purpose was, to get them down to see Tony Sarg's work down there. Now, Tony Sarg, of course, was Macy's wanted talent, and they had the best person to get because he was a creative genius who was also working on not just department store windows, but he was also a magazine cover designer. He had puppet shows, and he also was doing, I believe he was also an illustrator. And he took control, not just the windows, but as you'll see further on in this discussion, he became the creative genius that masterminded the balloons. Now, this is one of my favorite pictures. It's actually shown in the gallery. It's The Terrible Turk, 1929. That's Tony Sarg below, looking at his handiwork. I believe the gentleman up on the ladder is Ballard, who would also become a famous puppeteer. I like it because it's just looks like the time period there. Look at the young flapper lady down there alone with her hat on. It's 1920s. But you see the detail that he's putting in these balloons. Notice the face, the facial, the eyes, they were distinctly Sarg. And you'll see going forward in the early days of the parade, that facial look is indicative of puppetry, European-style illustration. Now, this is interesting. It's 1928. This is the Katzenjammer family. This is the first representation of comic strips in the Macy's parade. And again, it's novel because it's 3 characters. Now, unfortunately, in this photo you can't see, but behind is Mrs. Katzenjammer. She was the first female representation. It's not a high-flying balloon, but they're going to get higher and higher as the years go on. But it's a wonderful creation. You see the little whiskers there. That's fantastic. And again, the eyes. And there's something here you want to notice here. I'll probably go on, but one of the things I noticed is, before I get to Felix, there's no police barricades in these photographs. People back then just would comfortably sit on the curb and watch the parade. There was no hassle, no fuss, no muss. Now again, 1927, Felix the Cat. That's the really first superstar balloon because he was in movies. And you see the scale here. And the balloon is close to the ground at this point. Even though it's helium fuel, they kept it a little lower. But as you'll see as it goes on, the balloons would rise and rise. And again, this is one of my favorites from 1933. I jumped ahead. The colicky kid. Now, you can see the humor inherent in that balloon. Look at the mouth and the kid crying and the little fat belly. You can't get any more funny than that. And it's a little taste of floats. And as I go along, it will be a balloon-heavy presentation, but the floats are also part of the magic of the Macy's Parade. Now, we're going to skip to 1934, and I'm going to slow down a bit here because the balloons in concept, Tony Sarg wanted something that would be upside-down marionettes. And originally they were air-filled, but he wanted helium. And so in 1928, I believe, he went to Goodyear Rubber and Tire Company and created these helium balloons. They were made of a lighter, lightweight, they weren't like tire rubber, because that way they can bob and weave, and as they went down the line of march, people would be delighted to see them almost become alive to the kids that are there in the route. Now here we go, this is the first collaboration between Tony Sarg and Walt Disney. And they both get marquee representation. You see Walt Disney on top and Tony Sarg down below. So these two creative geniuses came together for this one parade. And as Elizabeth and I were discussing, Walt Disney, Tony would go on and create the parade, but in a few years he had gone on hard luck, whereas Walt Disney was just about to take off like a rocket. He had his cast of characters in movies, and then he had an idea that everyone thought was a disaster. He was going to do a feature-length cartoon. That was unheard of, and he did. It was called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Disney never looked back. And I want to look at this. Look at this picture. This is Mickey Mouse, and I love this representation. It's very simple, very cartoony, but it's eye-catching. Look at the balls for hands, the cucumber legs. And of course, the dot for eyes. That's my favorite representation of Mickey Mouse. And again, it's you can see the collaboration between Disney and Tony Sarg. I wish I could be an ant in the room to see what those two collaborated on or talked about. Who knows they even got along. Now, this is, again, in this type of era, a lot of more Disney characters were coming there. And this is the Big Bad Wolf, of course, from 1935. And again, very good design. You'll notice there's a lot of teeth in the Sarg era, which is very, very comedic. Anyone familiar with this balloon? Anybody? Wow, this is, again, the Nantucket Sea Monster. This is from 1937. We dated this photograph in. And look, the detail of this balloon is just fantastic. The spikes in the mid-body, the teeth, and again, the eyes. Pure Tony Stark in execution and design, and I'm sure the kids on the line of route were not scared at all. One of my favorite photographs, going back, 1931, George the Giant Drum Major. And in this photo, you can see now the balloons were being hoisted up high. I can tell you from experience, being in the parade, helium is a very, very powerful element. You're pretty much fighting the balloon from rising up to the sky, basically. It wants to go up as high as possible. But as you can tell, it's a great picture, and it just represents basically how much Macy's had improved in just a few short years. Now, this is one of my favorites, or two of my favorites. These are two balloons that you would never see after the World War II. And again, you can see why. They're the bizarre. They're oddball, but they're delightful. The two-headed pirate and the two-headed giant. Again, pure Sarg creations, but as you'll see going forward, the balloons would get more childlike and conventional, but these balloons were indicative of the 1930s. Now again, Macy's, not politically correct, Macy's chief Indian, And again, look at the detail, the teeth, the ornamentation. It looks like cigarette sticks or matchsticks up above him. But again, a great, great representation of the type of balloons that were in the 1930s. And these balloons were, they were not seen shortly after being used. A couple of them were reintroduced, but a lot of them were just part of history very shortly. This is one of my favorites, the giant Christmas stocking. You look at the detail that they put in this bayonet, the little toy soldier hanging out. You see the designs in the front. I don't believe this balloon became a classic. It's one of the first few times I've seen it, but I wish it had. It's delightful. Now, 1940, Superman. Now, the face is a Tony Sarg face, I could tell, but this was the first comic book character to be in the balloon. I'm partial to it because I was a comic book fan in my life there. But you see also it's the design is different from what would come later on. I'm going to touch on that in a few minutes. But this thing here, we're going to the color. Yes, there was color back then, believe that? This is, of course, this is not Walt Disney's Pinocchio. This is Tony Sarg's Pinocchio. And you notice that big balloon, and you can see the face, this young puppet is having a crisis. So it's bizarrely funny, but that was also in the style of Tony Sarg's balloon at that time. I think I have footage. Now, this is something that also happened with Macy's. They got smart. And I'm going to backpedal a bit, if you don't mind. In the early 30s, what they would do is they would release the helium balloons. They would get to 34th Street and then release them, and they would put a ticket on them. So if anyone found the balloon, they would get a prize. Now, what happened was there was a plane, little biplane, saw it and flew into it, and it got mixed in its wing, and the pilot was happy because he got his prize, but it was kind of dangerous. But the next year, it was a young pilot, a woman. She was traveling with a flight instructor. She saw it, and she flew into it, and it covered the wing, and the plane went into a tailspin down, and the pilot, the instructor, was able to right it up at the right second. But man, that could have been a disaster. So going forward, Macy's decided, well, maybe releasing balloons is not a good idea. But at this time, though, what they did, they got smart. They started to recycle balloons. To the left, of course, is the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. And a year later, it came back as Laugh Over the Clown, the same balloon, but it was redesigned. And it's something you'll see that happens a lot throughout the years. Now, let's see if we can do this here. This is the color footage from the parade from 1940. I want to show you this, and you see basically, again, the delightful type of balloons in the pre-World War II era. Let me just go ahead, let me just flip ahead again, if you don't mind. And I'll talk through it. And you see, like today, it's conventional. It has the balloons, you have the people in the line of the march. This, of course, is Central Park West. And of course, you're familiar with that, Elizabeth, of course. You know those buildings, right? And the line of march was different. Again, you see this great Tony Sarg Pinocchio. What a nose. My Lord. This kid needs to go to a hospital. Again, the floats, again, I wish I can get more floats in this presentation, but the balloons are always the ambassadors. They're the goodwill ambassadors of the parade. This is, I believe, a Popeye float, I think. There's the Tin Man, again, floating down. And we're going to pretty much, let me see more of its detail. Again, I'm going to just move ahead a bit. My apologies for that. Now, of course, this is the delightful trapeze artist. You'll see it has the top part, and you'll have the bottom part. Uncle Sam was a towering balloon. It wasn't used primarily, but it was used for a few years, but it was very impressive. And in the back, you can see the Santa Claus balloon. A very wonderful design from that era. So let's go to the end of this. So again, at this time, something happens. Tony Sarg, this is the 1941. So in 42, 1943, and 1944, there were no parade because of the war. And at that time, the mayor decided they were going to there was a rubber shortage. So that's what they used basically to take to the kids that there would be no parade. And it was a very tough time, of course. It was a lot of sacrifices, so you can understand why Macy's would suspend that time. It also explains, even though this is the 100th year of the Macy's parade, it's not the 100th parade because they were suspended for 3 years. But the kids were disappointed, but they did come back in a spectacular fashion. And I zip ahead to 1949, and this type of balloon now, I want to illustrate, it's different from the Sarg era, but it's representation of the 1940s. It's very simplistic, it's bulbous, it has a charm to itself, so it's still very delightful, this era. And I love the photograph again. It's the Upper West Side, and that's Central Park. It's a beautiful photograph. Now, again, like I said, Macy's would be an economical. Here's 3 balloons. This is the 1945 Bobo the Clown. And the Bobo would come back, a little quick change artist. In 1946, a baseball player. And in 1947, it'd be a policeman. Of course, I don't think people noticed. They were just delighted to look up and see a giant balloon. Now, let's go ahead into the 1950s. Now, this balloon now is historic, in my opinion, because it's, of course, the Mighty Mighty Mouse from the classic Mighty Mouse cartoons. But you notice something different. It's not just height, just sitting there static. It has its arms outstretched, and it looks like it's coming at you. And the balloon itself is very, very close to its cartoon origins. And you'll see this type of balloon used going forward. It's almost three-dimensional. And the 1950s, again, the giant spaceman, this was a balloon that was only used in its era. It's very big, and it's the space age now, so we see the change of time. And the 1950s is interesting because what happens is, I'll go back to then, it becomes a television era now. It was now being broadcast on NBC, and celebrities would now, in increasingly numbers, be part of the parade. And people were now experiencing the parade all over the United States, just sitting in the living rooms. Again, well, as a baby boomer, who hasn't remembered this balloon pop by? You'll see below, that's from the Goodyear Akron air duct. You see a woman just getting the finishing touches of Popeye's pipe there, and you see the other side there. And again, you see the difference is it's really accurately designed. And the Goodyear Rubber and Tire Company had geniuses that would really, really match the balloon as it was in TV. And you'll see exactly, you see the blueprint down below, and again, this is the delightful Bullwinkle. Everyone from older age, they all remember Bullwinkle. And these were, even after Bullwinkle and these parades, they weren't in commission, people still wanted them and asked for them. And again, you see how from that blueprint to the picture on the right, how detailed and exact that balloon was. Now, here's another favorite, a classic, Underdog. People still love this balloon. They still ask for it. You'll see that the scale, this is again from these are the test flights. Macy's would have, for photographers and for newspapers, would show the balloon first a few weeks before the actual parade. Great for promotion. And I guess this is another great representation of Underdog. I had the privilege of meeting Underdog's creator, Bill Harris, who was, he started out as an advertising guy, and he created the Tricks Rabbit. And the tagline, silly rabbit, tricks are for kids. And for that, he got nothing. So he was just an employee for General Mills. So we're going ahead here. Mrs. Jean McFadden. Now, I wanted to show her primarily because she was a wonderful woman. She was from Texas. She had a background in theater. And she was also wonderful at self-promotion. You'd always see her on television with a big cowboy hat. And she was instrumental in taking a parade, making a good parade into a fabulous parade. And if you look at some of the older photographs, you'll see a lot of gaps. You'll see a balloon passes by, a gap, marching band, a gap, float. And she wanted all these gaps filled with something. And she would call it human confetti, whereas anything, anybody, something throwing confetti, somebody waving, anything, clowns, more clowns, the more the better. And that made the show even more alive on television. I had a great interview with her and another gentleman named Manfred Bass, who was part of the parade studios. And I'm going to get to him in a few moments. Now, sorry about that. Now, what happens is, this is Sesame Street, of course, and that's a marriage made in heaven, of course. This is the 1970s, 78 to be exact for these photographs. Kermit the Frog, a great balloon creation, and to the left, of course, a float. The floats were always they were 2 stories, a balloon and a great float. And I had met the gentleman that was had created these great creative shows, and you know, Macy's had great relationship with Macy's. They had Macy's with Walt Disney, with Jim Henson, and also with other delightful balloon characters throughout the years, like Bugs Bunny. Now, this is a Humpty Dumpty Falloon. This is the handiwork of Miss McFadden. And you see, it was basically a cross between a balloon and a float. Now, in the history of the parade, there were sort of versions of that, but this was something that was unique to her. You can see the details of it. And it always looked great on camera. They could put a celebrity on there. And of course, we're going across the 34th Street. That's a signature shot there. The Macy's corner from Herald Square to 34th Street where the parade ends. Now, I said this was a balloon-heavy presentation, and forgive me, but they are the superstars. But let's stop here and look at this float. This is the Tom Turkey float. It's a brilliant design float from Manfred Bass. It has animatronics. The top of the head turns and opens his mouth, and you'll see the detail. They'll have someone perched on top. And at this point, the people down below, let's give them a shout out. They're not performers, they're not celebrities. They are Macy's employees who, for that day, they come there and they are a star for 5 minutes. They get before the camera, they can wave, and their family members can be delighted to see them as part of this big parade package. Now, 1999, this is a picture that I took, and again, this is again probably in Stevens Institute in New Jersey, where they used to have promotions for their parades. Millennial Snoopy, Honey Nut, and Cheerios B in blue. Now, I remember I turned to Miss McFadden at this point, and again, this is when I noticed that I was getting old, because I didn't know these parades. I knew Snoopy, but Cheerios B, blue, and she explained to me, she says, Chris, just so you know, you may not know who they are, but the kids in the line of march, they do. And that's who they target immediately. They know what's popular, who's up, who's down. And it was also the year later, they had a celebrity band that came through. And again, I had never heard from it. It was a young band that came by, they waved, and the girls went crazy. And it was a band called, what was it called? No, it was In Sync. I was like, who are these guys? And of course, you know, a beat later, they were the biggest thing in pop music. You know, so I had no, you know, some kid Justin Timberlake waving to the crowd. I didn't know. But, you know, I'm old. So this is another one. This is another picture that I took. Again, I think it was probably at Giant Stadium. Band leader Mickey. So Mickey Mouse and Snoopy had different incarnations throughout the Macy's parade. Again, I was preferable to the first one. The second one was a little different, but this one was wonderful in design. Now I'm going to step back a bit. You know, Goodyear had a 50-year relationship with Macy's, and then it stopped. And then it was for a short term. There was a place called Kemp Balloons, and thereafter it was Aerostar, and Raven Aerostar. And they would do delightful, very lightweight, very colorful incarnations of balloons. And again, you see it's going directly into the camera. It's very camera ready. Now, I'm going to end here just a bit. This is Edwin Gwynn, of course, from the 1947 classic Miracle on 34th Street. It was shot at Macy's in 1946. When you see that movie, that's the actual parade happening. They also shot part of it in the Hollywood studios. And I'm going to end here. My partner, Robert M Grippo, who was the guiding force of our book, and it was his favorite movie. And if you actually go to the DVD, he's one of the participants in the special edition. He sadly passed away this year from cancer, and so I'm here in his stead. He was a delightful ball of entry. I know he's here in spirit, so I hope I did him justice. And that's my story, and I hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
I have a lot of favorite quotes. A quote that has been with me many, many years. Life was made for having fun. I live by those words. And I think the parade is a perfect example of pure joy. 27 years ago, on my way to take a tennis lesson, I saw somebody running around the reservoir that I thought I knew. And I yelled out like a lunatic, "Billy, Billy!" And as we got closer, I realized, my God, I said, "I'm so sorry. I thought you were someone I know named Billy Cohen." And he said, "That's funny, I'm Bill Kahane." And I said, "How do you like that? He's in real estate." And he said, "I used to be in real estate." And I said, "No kidding. I'm with Edward S. Gordon." And he said, "I'm having dinner with Ed Gordon tomorrow night." And I reached into my tennis bag and I gave him my business card. And as they say, the rest is history. I always tell my son Harry, 2 minutes in the other direction, there wouldn't be a Harry. And looking for a new place, knowing we would more than likely be there together, he asked me what I would like, and I said, well, I have to be on the park. Aren't they fun? And the only thing I don't have is the Macy's Day Parade. He walked into Harperley Hall, and the broker said, from the dining room table, you can watch the Macy's Day Parade. I always have my camera with me. And I used to feel like the camera was my friend. I got one leg out, one leg in. And the camera is a vehicle for you to capture that excitement, bottle it up, and if you're lucky, you can share it with others. These are just historical reference of 25 years. As they said, some of the balloons retired, some of them changed. Some years there's no leaves, some years there's more leaves. Some of the trees grow. I can open the windows up. So those are the things that are inconsistent, but the rest of it never changes. Happiness, joy, exciting, it's always the same. The marching bands, the balloon. So it's a love affair of Central Park. It's a love affair of the parade, and goes without saying, a love affair with my husband, Bill, and then a love affair with our son, Harry.
Well, thank you. I have to tell you, first of all, I'm going to get to thanking you, but on the heels of the movie, I just want to say it's a micro 3 minutes, and it's in the book in a QR code in the back, and it's actually a finalist in 2 film festivals right now, Culver City and Austin Micro Film Festival. So thank you for showing it, and I'm thrilled about it. And I'll get to that in a moment, how it came about, but I just wanted to thank Chris because a lot of things he talked about are in my book. And the reason is when I was putting this together, and we're perfectly timed because his book came out in 2004, and my book is the last 25 years. But the reason I went back in history for my book is because it's the 100th birthday. And I thought it was important to make those references. And there's so much people don't know, like Tony Sarg, and which is why I came to be here. And I'll share that story with you too. But I also felt like I wanted the viewer to get a lot of bang for their buck in my, what's really a photo book. And so I put in, "Did you know?" And you have to hear my voice when you read it. "Did you know?" and I had to bring this to show Chris. I've had this book for years, and there really are no great books about the parade, which is, I think, why my book is being so well received. The press has been amazing. I mean, I ran into David Worth on the ferry. I was telling him, Town and Country, Time Out, New York Post, Vogue Magazine, People Magazine. I'm going to be November 26th with Tony, not Tony Sarg, that would be nice. I would love that. November 26th on the Al Roker Show and today, so watch at 9 a.m. But anyway, this book has completely been ripped apart and highlights. This is his book. And a lot of the information that I learned and the research I did came from this book. It's a really, you can get it on Amazon, by the way. It's a really good read. Thank you. And also want to thank the Nantucket Historical Society because the Tony Sarg exhibit is fantastic, and how I wished I could have met him. I think we would have gotten along because I have that kid in me too that wants to have fun, and I'm very creative. And how I came to come here is because I was fact-checking for my Did You Knows, and one of the Did You Knows that many of you folks here probably know this, but where did the Red Star logo come from Macy's? And the answer is R.H. Macy was born and raised in Nantucket. And he went on his whaling ship as a young boy, and he got himself a Red Star tattoo. And that was the inspiration for the logo. And so somewhere else I read said he was a captain, some said he was a young boy, so I called the Nantucket Historical Society to fact check it. And I found out, in fact, it is true. And then I found out about the Tony Sarg exhibit, and I came here. So, and Jocelyn Wong has been extraordinary. You're very lucky to have her. She's quite a delight. And so thank you very much for having me. But I think the reason my book is resonating as well is because so much has been said and photographed endlessly, I'm sure, about the parade. What could you do different? And I think what's different about my book, it's a real personal story. It's 25 years from my home, from my third floor window. I'm passionate about it. I'm committed. I never miss it. In 27 years, I missed it twice. Once was my father's birthday, and another was another occasion. But honestly, last year, for example, I flew back from Amsterdam the day before and went back that night, not to miss the parade, because my whole family was there because we had a baby in the family, and I went. But I came back for the parade, and that's how I got those shots, because I didn't have any guests in the window. But anyway, how I came hooked to be hooked on the parade was really, I always enjoyed the viewing of the balloons being blown up, and I was north of the parade, so I never got to see the actual parade. And so you can imagine the excitement, and you heard in the story of how we came to buy the place and view the parade. And I hope you enjoy it. There's a directory in the back. I didn't want to have too much text other than the Did You Knows, and you can reference every single page, the name of the balloon, what year, and if there's a celebrity on the float. You know, an interesting thing about the floats, I always love the big balloons. Of course, you see some of my photos. That's astronaut Snoopy and Hello Kitty, who's having a moment. And I never really focused on the floats. Of course, I have the photos. But it was so much fun in making of the book because I could then learn who was on it, what celebrity, and the name. And so I learned a lot myself making the book. And I just want to show you a little bit about the design because I feel that it's part of the charm of the book is performative. It opens, it's called a Swiss binding, like this. And then you have sort of a book in the book. But some of these expressions actually come from Chris's book, from the posters, from the 20s and 30s, before there was television. Mammoth and Mirthful, Nation's Best Gift, Holiday Extravaganza. So we really had a great time designing this book. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't say Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It's Miracle on 64th Street. So, which is also interesting because it used to be on local television, and it really was the movie that's also mentioned in my book. It won several awards, Academy Awards. I think it was acting, movie, several awards. And it was after that movie that it became nationally televised. So I was very happy to have, lucky enough to say Miracle on 64th Street. And another interesting thing is how the book came about is I was invited to do an exhibit of the work in Sarasota, which opens December 5th. And one of the reasons I was invited is because, for this particular work is the director felt that she wasn't sure what the mood of the country was going to be and after the elections. And certainly we can all agree that the parade is happy and joyful and brings the community together, and we can all agree on parades. And so that inspired then the book. So that's one thing we all know about parades. And I think Tony Sarg shared this feeling of wanting to have fun, express joy, and it's very community oriented. And I love about parades, they're free for everyone. So that's a nice feature. I have some slides that we can show. Or do I have to do it? What do I do? Oh, there we go. I love the crowd. This is one of my favorite shots from 2011. So I'm on the corner. And it's in the book, of course. But if you'll notice, I don't know if you can tell from the screen, but there's a couple of folks taking my photo. And all the way as far as you can see, they're looking at me and they're waving to me and they got the kids on their shoulder. Hey, look at that crazy lady in the window. But it's so New York. And this is a perfect example of photography is a moment they can't necessarily repeat because those trees have grown now. I can never get that shot again. But also, since the pandemic, we really haven't had those crowds. They're coming back. But pre-pandemic, this is what you would see all the way down the street because the balloons are so high, you can still enjoy it. But this is 64th. The Central Park West is here, and this is Ethical Culture and 64th Street going that way. And it's just one of my favorites. It's so New York. I mean, look at these crowds. They just love being there. Everybody's so happy. Oh, I have to do it. And there's Hello Kitty. So she's celebrating 50th birthday, I guess you've heard. And she's not considered a cat, apparently. I'm trying to understand this. But she's a favorite. And as Chris pointed out, people don't realize this, but all of these balloons eventually retire. So it's the same thing. You won't see this one again. Sometimes they're in 1 year. Maybe it's 2. Maybe it's 3. Some of them come back as different characters, like Snoopy's been in many, many times. Ronald McDonald comes back in various forms. A new balloon, and then they retire them, and that's it. You won't see them again. So I'm just thrilled to have Hello Kitty, especially she's part of my cover design when she's celebrating her 50th birthday. Oh, next. Oh, this one's fun because this is, of course, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But what I like about this, first, I love the perspective. And am I talking here or here? Oh, here. Oh, I don't have to talk. Sorry. It's the perspective. You can see Mickey Mouse coming up the rear. But also what I love about this shot is you see the balconies in my building. So I'm on the 3rd floor. I don't have a balcony. The balconies start right above me, as you can see. And the point of that is, since Jean McFadden, who was known as the Parade Lady, and she's in my book, since she took over, she made this kind of Broadway performance, spectacular, with the Rockettes and everything. Some people that aren't even marching, but are in front of Macy's. So every once in a while, the parade pauses. And I'm sure it's because of that show going on in front of Macy's. And when they pause, because of these balconies, which are filled with my neighbors and their guests. And I think we may be the only building on Central Park West that has balconies. I'm not sure if there's one other, maybe, but I don't think so. But so they're looking up at us, and I'm getting these great shots. So they stop, and they look up at me, and I get this wonderful moment of connection with the dancers, the cheerleaders, the marching bands. It's really, really fun. But I like that this shot shows those balconies. Oh, this is funny. So this was just this last year, as I mentioned, because I was actually there alone. I made the movie, and I had to go in the morning. You know, they line up when the sun, I can tell you, it's still dark out, and you wake up, and they're already coming out to get their spots. That's a big thing to watch. I love watching that from the window. Little by little, they start to populate the sides. They bring their tables, and they're very territorial. So I had to get out there really early to put the tripod to have the young man to take photos of me in the window. And these guys that are up waving to me with the turkey hats on, I got to meet them, and I told them I'm making a movie, and kind of leave my tripod here. Can you watch it for me? You know, that kind of thing. And next thing, during the parade, they're yelling, Elizabeth, Elizabeth. So again, this is just the most fun about the third floor window. You've got this wonderful perspective, but there's a connection that you can make with the crowd and with the parade, and I absolutely love that part. I hope they find themselves in the book. I should have gotten their number. Oh, this is one of my favorites. So I don't know if most people know this, but what goes on with the marching bands is the high schools, I think college too, right, Chris? Throughout the country participate in what is essentially a contest. And apparently it's quite secretive, and there's a group that chooses them from Macy's, and they go around and they show up by surprise. You won. And so every year a group of bands are chosen, and this is one of them. And I forgot the name, but it's the Mountain something. It's in the book because this is one of my favorite shots. But also there's the Macy's Great Band that is individuals that are chosen, right, Chris, from around the country. And they're the official Macy's American Band. And so it's really extraordinary what goes into creating this parade. There's that part of it too, that you don't necessarily know these details, but if you're in a marching band, you do. And I absolutely love, 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 love the marching bands. What's not to love? Oh, I call these the Candy Cane girls. I made that up. But this is an example of what I was talking about before, because you see how they're looking up to the people on the balconies, and they're looking at me, and they're looking at my neighbors, and they're so beautiful. I really hope that some of these folks find themselves in my book, because when you're in the parade, you can't necessarily see yourself, and this is a moment to really reflect on how they have their ribbons in their hair, how they put their makeup on, all the little details, and so much detail goes into all these costumes. It's really remarkable. It's the best public art there is in New York, if you really think about it, and all that is created for this spectacular event. But somebody said to me, I don't think this, but the book is even better than the parade, but just because it gives you this moment to contemplate the scene. Oh, and this is it. So this is Ada Twist. She's a scientist. And, you know, I wanted to show this slide because I think it's really important. In 100 years, this year, she's only the second African-American balloon in the parade. So we have to do a better job when we look at who we are as Americans. But, and of course, it begs the question, who was the first? Chris, you know who it was? Okay, it was Billy, Little Bill. It was Bill Cosby. It was the cartoon, Little Bill. I forgot the year, but yeah, so this is Ada Twist. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to show Ada Twist. And isn't she beautiful? Looks so similar eyes as the Tony Sarg eyes. Oh, and that's it. Well, what else can I say? I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope that my book brings joy and fun and can be shared generationally and for generations to come. Thank you very much.
All right, now we can take some questions from the crowd. If you have questions for Chris or Elizabeth, they are here to answer. So just raise your hand if you have a question. All right.
Well, okay, I have a question.
So comprehensive.
I have a question. How about anybody want to share what's their favorite balloon in a Thanksgiving story? You got to have a favorite.
We won't tell anybody, I'm sure.
How many people have actually not watched it on television, but been there to see it live? Yeah. How many people here have seen the Tony Sarg exhibit? Yeah.
And if you have not seen the exhibition yet, please come by the Whaling Museum. It'll be up until the end of the year, so you have a little over a month to do so.
I want to share something else with you, by the way. So Jocelyn was kind enough to introduce me to Bill Smith, and many of the photos actually in this book
That's correct.
are his collection. And after I met him, you won't believe this, he is making me a 12-foot tall inflatable replica, balloon replica, like you have the sea monster outside, of the book. Bill Smith. Yes. So there's the movie, the book, the balloon. It's pretty fabulous. I can't wait for him. I wanted to have it here, but it's not quite ready yet, but it'll be ready.
Yeah, and Bill
soon.
Smith is the balloon artist that the NHA commissioned to do the sea monster that we had a children's speech this summer.
Yeah.
So I know which
Have a
balloon is
question.
my favorite. It would be the Nantucket Sea Monster.
Of course. Jocelyn,
All right, we have one question
Roger.
there.
I was wondering, is there a place you can go to where they're filling the balloons or watch that being done? You know, some staging area?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
You want to take it? Or that's your neighborhood.
It's the night before over by Museum of History, Natural Museum of History, and the New York Historical Society. That's where they blow them up. And the thing is, you know, this is what got me hooked. I used to do this every year. But I think it was G. McFadden. Somebody made it a television show. So now it's not so easy to see it. And there's, you know, it's guarded, police, and there's crowds. But it used to be this little New York secret. And you would go there later. The later, the better, because they would start blowing them up, you know. So.
They actually have a name for it. They call it Inflation Eve. And like you said,
Oh, I didn't know that.
they said that became a big thing. It was just people in the, you go there and there's people in their apartments and they're sitting there with their wine and they
Oh,
look
that's
at
the other party, right?
The other party, yes. So they're with the wine looking at the Macy's parade. But like you said, it was a secret. People would go there with the kids and
Yeah.
see it overnight. But then now it's like, I think it's a bigger show than the parade at this point.
Yeah.
So the poor people up there in the Central Park West, they have to deal with it, I guess, or just go away for the weekend when it happens.
Yeah. Well, you have to have a pass that says you're invited by someone that lives there. That's a little trick. It works. Oh, we've got another question over here.
Is there a home for the retired balloons or a museum?
Well, pardon me. Yeah, the Macy's parade, what happens is they have a parade studio in New Jersey. And I believe some of their old balloons are in carts, still in storage. The person I spoke with, it was worked for Sesame Street, said he actually saw a cart and it was marked Underdog. And it's still there, like, you know, the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, just sitting there for people to pass by and wonder what's in there. Anyone else?
What are your Thanksgiving Day plans? Can we come over? Who's cooking turkey?
Well, I think I want to join you in your third floor apartment for
All
Thanksgiving.
invited.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth and Chris, for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much.
Just want to let you all know, if you're going to be here this weekend and have some visiting kiddos, we're actually doing a mini Nantucket version of the Thanksgiving parade here at the Whaling Museum, starting with a little presentation about the history of the parade and its connection to Tony Sarg that will be accessible for the little ones. So a shorter version of your presentation today, and then there will be a puppet show from a local puppeteer, and we will parade around the museum. So please bring them by the museum at 9:30 on Saturday, this Saturday. And now that we have a little bit of insight about the parade, the historical context, and a story about your personal experience with the
window.
parade, we can all watch the parade on our televisions or in person on November 28th and think about how this wonderful tradition was started 100 years ago. So happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for joining us tonight.